Today's What's Next Wednesday. It's February the 11th. Today is Show Me the Money, finding scholarships and financing your plan. It's tough. The bigger part is figuring out everything that we're trying to do in this, in the world that we're in, how to make sure our kids have the right information, not only to start the process, but then also to continue the process, but then also how do they pay for it? If, academics or scholarship from being an athlete isn't in that space, what are some other options? And, today we're going to do those things. And hopefully the information that we're going to give you is going to also allow you to be able to figure out those parts and those pieces today. Today we got a great panel of individuals that's going to be helping us today, and better together. Everything we do and everything that we do in every day is one of those things that as we do it together, our schools, our community, it makes for a better tomorrow. But that's what we have today. We have a grass representative in Lauren White. We have Chesterfield Education Foundation representative and Gina, and then we also Staff Sergeant Christine. She's here as well from the Armed Forces space, and they're all going to talk about in their specialty what they can do. Because the thing is, what we have a plethora
business
of
specialist.
Thank you. Specialists. So we have a plethora of colleges across across the United States, and not only that state colleges, but then also we also have HBCUs as well, junior colleges, and a lot of those other parts that goes along with that. So we're trying to figure out how does that work. And tonight's, like I said, topic is one parents are asking about more and more and more, and that's how where's the money and how do we find it? How do we pay for college? Which scholarships are actually real, and then how do we make sure we're not leaving money on the table? Tonight's is about options, not pressure. Whether a student is planning for a 4-year college, community college, or is still figuring out the next steps on their journey. And then also the resources of funding, and are they available? Where are they available? And how can I take advantage of those? Our goal tonight is to help families understand where the money is and how to access it, and how they can find the help to get through this process. A panel on right, like I said, from Graves, Gina Bedford from Chesterfield Education Foundation, and then Staff Sergeant Christine Hubbard, who is she's a career counselor, all those parts and pieces. That every one of them, any questions that we want and have throughout this session, just put them in the chat, raise your hand, and hopefully we can answer them. We're gonna have some time at the end as well to do that. We're gonna start off really the biggest part of everything that we're looking at is trying to find those other parts. Hold on one second, let me get these people in here. There we go. So Lauren, we'll start off with you. When parents hear financial aid, what does that actually include?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again, Ken, for having me. So financial aid, I like to break down into 4 categories. The first being merit aid. So that is going to be your academic scholarships or your sports scholarships. So they're looking at a lot of different criteria, GPAs, SAT scores, extracurriculars, etc. And then you have grants. So that is needs-based aid. And you can get grants from 3 different places. The federal government, that's the Pell Grant. Virginia state governments, state government if your student stays in state, and then the schools themselves can offer grants. And this money, like scholarships, is gifted to the student. They do not have to pay it back, unlike loans. So loans, of course, is money that is borrowed and then paid back. There are 2 types of student loans. There is the unsubsidized loan, $2,000. And that loan, you do start to accrue interest on that loan right away at I believe it's 6.3% interest rate right now. And then there is also a subsidized loan, of $3,500 your student's freshman year. This loan is a need-based loan, meaning that not all students are offered it, and they can be offered on a sliding scale anywhere between 0 and the maximum amount. And the nice thing with this loan is that you do not start to accrue interest on it until 6 months after graduation. And then lastly, there's work study. So this is a federal program where a student can get a job on their college campus and earn money that they pocket and could put towards whatever they want. So it could be tuition, it could be textbooks, toiletries for their dorms, extra, cash in their pocket to go out for food. But those are going to be the 4 main ways that students can get financial aid for college. And of course, the biggest thing I like to emphasize with financial aid is the way to get it is by completing FAFSA. That is the free application for federal student aid. And so in order to qualify for all need-based aid, you must complete the FAFSA.
Awesome. And those things that, is in some of those little details, that we sometimes don't understand, grant versus loan versus work study. And so those are very important parts and pieces that allow us to, navigate, what we're looking for and how we're trying to find it. What are the most common FAFSA mistakes that cost families money?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are several that I've seen. One that's pretty common is misreporting 529 plans. And this has actually changed fairly recently within the last 5 years, I believe, but the parent only needs to put down the 529 plan if they have one for the student that they're filling out the FAFSA for. So say you have multiple students in your home, you have multiple 529 plans for said students. You do not have to put down all the 529 plans that you have, just the one that you have for your student. And you do not include any additional 529 plans that the student might be the beneficiary of from another relative. Say, the student's grandpa has a 529 plan for them. You do not have to put that down, only the parent's 529 plan for the student that they're completing the FAFSA for. We can also see parents accidentally including things that they think are assets that need to be included on the FAFSA, but actually do not need to be included on the FAFSA. That includes retirement accounts and the value of the primary home. And then obviously another big one is missing the priority deadline. So each college has their own priority deadline like they do for the Common App or just their general applications. And so you'll have to go on the financial aid page of each school's website and look and see what their priority deadlines are. And you want to make these deadlines because it will maximize the amount of money your student receives that they qualify for. So each school sets aside a certain amount of money for a rising class, and to guarantee that your student gets the amount that they qualify for, you want to make the priority deadline. And then the last one I would say is for certain schools, they require the FAFSA and then an additional form called the CSS profile. And so this is only select schools in the country. In Virginia, we just have 5 schools that require it. It's UVA, William & Mary, University of Richmond, Washington, and Lane Hollins. And so these schools have a lot of money to give, but because of that, they require an additional form with the FAFSA called the CSS profile. And without that form, they cannot give out their own aid to students. So if a student only fills out the FAFSA and includes that school on the FAFSA, they can still get federal aid, they can still get state aid, but they cannot get money from that school. So those are some pretty common mistakes that I've seen with the FAFSA.
And now, what about if a family doesn't, or what happens if a family doesn't fill out the FAFSA because they don't think they won't qualify?
Yeah, and that's I get that that concern or that comment from families sometimes. Like, I don't think I'm going to maybe qualify for federal aid. So what is the reason I would be filling it out? There are some schools that want to have the FAFSA and or CSS profile in to even give out merit aid. They just require those documents in the student's profile. Also, that $2,000 unsubsidized loan that I mentioned, that is not a need-based loan. So as long as you complete the FAFSA, you can take that loan out. And so with that loan, again, it's about a 6.3% interest rate, which on average is going to be probably a lower interest rate than you might be able to get at a private bank. And then it also does give the parent the option to take out federal Parent Plus loans. And so that is a loan just for the parents that they can take out. And so we always encourage our parents to compare what a Parent Plus federal loan looks like compared to maybe a private bank's loan. So just to have the option to be able to look at that is incredibly beneficial as well. And it doesn't hurt to fill out. And it's super easy now too. It takes about 20 minutes. So I always tell families that it can't hurt you, it can only help you.
Now, for some parents, and they may not have had, and that's their first time, first kid, the family demographics could be. What is the 529 plan?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a specific investment account that it only takes $25 to start, and you can set it up for your child's education. And it's never too late to set up the plan either. You don't have to set it up, right when you first have your student. You can set it up now. And so that is an account that you can use towards your student's education.
That's awesome. And that's one thing a lot of people, and that's pre-tax money as well.
Yes,
a lot of people don't understand. And a lot of times with that 529 plan, it's a lot of people don't take advantage of it. Because sometimes they don't know about it, and then sometimes just being able to figure out that they don't know that it is pre-tax, that it's not really going to affect them at all when you literally look at your paycheck, because that's something you think about. Where do you waste money each paycheck or each month? Where do you waste it? And if you start that, if you're able to start it, or if you get your kids to understand, this is something you should do for them, they're able to, their kids, or wherever your kid is starting now, they're able to pay for some of their college or all their college when they get to that time and point. So very good information right there. What about this? If I have a junior or a student in lower grades right now, what should they be doing to prepare for this process?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that I suggest students do and parents do is go ahead and set up your FSA ID. And so what I mean when I say FSA ID, it's essentially just your account that you will need in order to complete and submit the FAFSA. So you will do all of this on studentaid.gov. The student will need their own account, and then a parent will need their own account. If the parents are married and file their taxes jointly, only one parent will need to make an account. If the parents are married and file separately, then both parents will need to make an account. And if parents are divorced, then the parent that contributes more than 50% of the student's finances will be the parent on the FAFSA. The other parent will not be on the FAFSA. And so you can go ahead and make this account now. And I really recommend doing it earlier, because you never know, you could run into issues, especially you need your social security number to make the student's account. Sometimes students think they know their social security number and they don't. And it is an amendable issue, but it does take a couple phone calls. And it's better to just be able to troubleshoot those small little things now, so that when the form does open up in October, you can go ahead, hit the ground running, and get it in as early as possible. You can also just start exploring all of the post-secondary educational options that are available for your student. Because we have, 4-year college and university, we have 2-year community college, we have great career and certificate programs. So looking at maybe what kind of college experience your student is interested in, what they want to study, and seeing what the options are in state, out of state. You can obviously go on tours to campus, but they also have virtual tours if you can't make it out there, which is really lovely. So just familiarizing yourself and really opening that conversation for the whole family. Another thing that I really recommend students do, because it does get so busy at the beginning of their senior year and it really doesn't slow down till the end, is setting up a method for tracking all of their deadlines, because they're going to have application deadlines, they're going to have financial aid deadlines, they're going to have scholarship deadlines, and it is a lot for a student to keep up with. So figuring out what is going to be the best way for a student to track when everything is due, what they've done, what they still need to do. So it could be a calendar, it could be a spreadsheet, it could be written down, digitized, whatever works best for that student. I would start thinking about them now. And then starting to figure out scholarships, looking for scholarships. So right now, a lot of the scholarships that are going to be available for the student have not opened up yet. But if you go to, you know, grassforva.org, not to plug my own website, have a page that has a bunch of scholarship resources. So that includes vetted databases, a list of scholarships that we've compiled, different local scholarships, national scholarships. You can start looking and seeing what the criteria is for that scholarship, seeing if maybe, you know, your student would be a really strong candidate for that scholarship. And when I say strong candidate, what I mean is that I recommend that students try to find scholarships that are specific to them as possible. So considering what they do inside and outside of school, whether that be clubs, sports, honor society, volunteer work, a job, church, anything like that, what their academic interests are, what their own experiences and identity have been, and just trying to find a scholarship that maybe has a couple of those, you know, aspects about the student, so that there is fewer competition for the student and that it's an easier application for them to send in. So looking around and finding scholarships that you think would be a good fit for your student and just writing them down somewhere so that you can start checking back up on them when you're in your senior year. Typically, if a scholarship, say, opens up like March 1st of 2026, it's a good likelihood that it will open up again close to, if not March 1st, 2027. So just starting to write down scholarships that look like they could be a good fit for your student so that you can keep an eye on them as you get into your senior year and you don't miss them or miss those deadlines. Those would be some solid things to do starting now and instead of waiting until the senior year to do.
Yeah, again, and that's the bigger part. And when Gina gets on, you'll hear about the stories that she's seen over the past times that they've been that she's been part of the Chesterfield Education Foundation. But yeah, because right now there are different spaces like the NFL. I know NFL, a lot of the major league sports, they have scholarships as well, and a lot of those are coming to fruition at the middle to end of this month. So, and some of that information I'll send out, and then some of it I'll look some of the other scholarships in those spaces I'll also send out as well, so you guys can see that. But what about this? What's the difference between free money and borrowed money?
Yeah, so with gifted aid, so it can be merit-based, need-based, or both. There are some scholarships out there that look at both how much financial need a family has and also looks at, you know, essays, GPA, all of that. So that gifted aid does not need to be paid back. One thing I will note, especially with scholarships, is to check and see if that scholarship is renewable, if it is for all 4 years or if it is just for 1 year. Because that can affect how much aid a student is getting from their freshman year to their sophomore year to their junior year. And another thing I'll add just on scholarships is that students can also get undergraduate scholarships. Those are available for students. And then borrowed money, so loans. Like I said, there's going to be that $2,000 unsubsidized loan. As long as the student fills out the FAFSA every year, they can get that loan every year. Now, with the subsidized loan, again, a student needs to qualify for it because it is a need-based loan. They can get up to $3,500 their freshman year. If they qualify for the maximum amount, they can then get up to $4,500 their sophomore year and $5,500 their junior and senior year. And so that is money that they will begin to pay back when they graduate from college. And so talking about loans, I think that that's something that's on a lot of students' minds right now. And one tool that I really recommend families looking at together, on federalstudentaid.gov, there is a loan simulator that you can do where you can plug in, you know, a different amount that maybe the student's coming out of college with in terms of loans that they have to pay back. And you can look at different federal payment plans and how much a student would be paying a month to pay it off in a certain amount of years. I think it is an amazing way to really sit down and look and like ground something that feels kind of, I feel like, theoretical to a lot of students. They know that loans exist, but they don't really know what the actual process of accumulating a loan is and what it looks like to pay it back. So to sit down and do that with a student, I think really grounds that and, you know, makes them aware of like, just the reality is that many students do take out loans, but hopefully students can, if they have to, can limit the amount of loans that they can take out. So just making them aware of what that payment process looks like. And then, like I mentioned before, there are parent loans that can be taken out through the federal government, the Parent Plus loans. So a parent can opt to take it out through the federal government, or of course they can take out a private loan through their bank if they prefer to do that as well.
Awesome. Now we've heard CSS, right? And the CSS profile. You've spoken on that. What happens if a student skips it?
Yeah. So with the CSS profile, it's a tricky form in the way that it is a lot longer than the FAFSA, and it's I would say a lot more tedious in terms of, you know, what it's asking and again how long it's going to take you to complete. But it is paramount that a student completes the CSS profile for the schools that they want to attend that require it, because without that form, a student cannot qualify for any of the aid that the school can potentially offer that student. And a lot of CSS profile schools, again, these are schools that are older, have lots of donors, have a large endowment, so they can offer the student a lot of money potentially. I've seen several CSS profile schools that have a Pell Grant promise where they will cover full tuition, sometimes tuition, room and board for the student. But if that student doesn't turn in the CSS profile, then they cannot qualify for that aid. And so the CSS profile, it is a College Board form, and it does require, unlike the FAFSA, it does require a payment to open up the form. It's $25 to start the form, and then $16 for every additional school that you apply to. But for qualifying families, they can get a fee waiver for that form. So I would definitely look into seeing, of the schools that your student is looking into, do they require the CSS profile? You can just very easily look up on College Board a list of schools that require the CSS profile. And then additionally, with the CSS profile, some schools will also want copies of your taxes and W-2s. So on that list of schools, you can see which of those schools that require those forms and which don't.
Awesome. Thank you, Lauren. And remember, everyone, there are grants representatives at every Chesterfield County school, and I'll drop that list in an email once I get this formatted, so you all will have that, and I'll just send that out probably tomorrow morning anyway, so you have it to start. You know, just those who haven't really put some of the pieces together, that they can start putting some of those pieces. And remember, it's never too late to take advantage of any of this. And that's the bigger part that we have to realize, that, you know, a lot of times on all diplomas, there are no years. And so the thing is, it's getting it started. And right now that we can help you start that journey is part of that. Lauren just explained how money gets unlocked. Now let's talk about money that families don't sometimes even know really exists, and sometimes doesn't even get claimed sometimes. And Gina, you know all about that.
Yes.
One of the most frustrating things that I've seen, I know Gina has seen, that we see every year in local scholarship money, that it doesn't get awarded, or it doesn't get taken, and people forget about it. Gina.
Yes.
What is the Chesterfield Education Foundation, and why are local scholarships so important?
Well, Ken, first, I'd like to thank you for having me this evening and allowing me to share about the foundation. So Chesterfield Education Foundation is a nonprofit that supports students and teachers in Chesterfield County Public Schools. And we have many programs, but one of our biggest priorities is helping students remove financial barriers so that they can, you know, pursue their education and career goals after graduation. And we have many scholarships out there. And as you said, oftentimes, you know, it's just a matter of making parents and families aware. So very thankful for your program this evening.
Oh, we froze.
Because
Hold on.
they're designed specifically for our community, right? So in the case of CEF and Chesterfield Education Foundation, we refer to CEF. Most of the scholarships that we have and that are awarded are tied through families that have a direct connection to the community. And so these are often, you know, scholarships that consider unique circumstances and goals and strengths of Chesterfield County students. And so, you know, also the local focus is really means that some of our students might not qualify for larger or national scholarships, but they have them right here at home, so to speak. So it's important that they're aware of what's available to them.
Yes, and it is, and those are things that, you know, that we need to, you know, make a lot of our parents and our students aware of, because I've worked in other counties where you see one kid with all the scholarships, you know,
Yes.
because they knew about them. And then sometimes it's just a matter of, you know, even down to parents who do want to be, you know, lead, that's a legacy as well. So understanding what the Education Foundation does, you know, is very useful, and it's not just you know, the Education Foundation is it not only helps students, but it helps our whole entire school system in a lot of different spaces, and when there are some needs, because, you know, there are sometimes areas that come up, but Gina, why do, you know, sometimes Chester Education Foundation, why CEF scholarships sometimes go unused?
So Ken, I would say the biggest reason why some of our scholarships go unused is that parents and students just don't know that they're available. You know, students don't realize that they qualify, they miss the deadline, or they think that they're not going to get it, so they don't apply. But let me just say this. So our scholarships will be opening soon, and that information will be made available to the public and through CCPS website, our website. But, you know, sometimes too, students think that you know, oh, there's a scholarship out there for this or that, not realizing, as Lauren mentioned earlier, which I was really glad she did, it could be tied to a hobby. It could be tied to, you know, we have scholarships for students that have an interest in photography, were in theater, played a sport, you know. So a lot of times they go unused just because the students aren't aware. And so awareness and access makes all the difference.
There it is. And it's funny, you know, we talk about not knowing, you know, and then this hobbies and others. Today, well, a couple weeks ago, I was at the chamber, and schools that run along this, was it Southwest Energy pipeline? I think it's Southwest, and I'll get the information more. But they award, I know they have a scholarship that
they do.
Cosby and another one of the schools out in that area can take in those schools. I think it's Cosby and James River can take advantage of their scholarship. Then today I ran into a young lady where it's a nonprofit, and that's another area you look at. Most nonprofits, CEF is a nonprofit.
Yes.
They deal with dogs, and they help to, you know, just feed families who have dogs and they struggle with doing that. But they will give a scholarship to someone that who want to go into veterinarian practices, a $5,000 scholarship. And so, and it's renewable. So, you know, those are the things where we just don't know what we don't know in those different spaces. So, and with that being said, Gina, when it comes down to help me relate to these parents, to the parents and students, many of these scholarships, they're not, you know, academically heavy rigor or GPA heavy, or test scores focused, or it's one size fits all. Is that the case in most of these scholarships?
So you hit it right on the head, Ken. You know, a lot of times students feel like, oh, my GPA or my test scores, but I can say that our scholarships lean more toward activities, character, goals. So, you know, students shouldn't not apply because of test scores, GPA, etc. You know, our scholarships are designed for a wide variety of students at CEF, and you know, hardworking students, and you know, a lot of our families that create these scholarships want students that, you know, demonstrate perseverance, community involvement, a commitment to, you know, so it's not about the GPA. And that's what I hope that, you know, the parents joining us tonight will share with their students. You know, they, and we have a lot of them. We have over 20 scholarships that we offer, and all different kinds, as I stated earlier, but really just want to get the word out.
Awesome. Hey, are you able, can you speak to some of the scholarships that will be available when they come open?
Absolutely. So we have trade and career path scholarships. So if there's students that are looking for a skilled trade, you know, baking, any, you know, electrical, plumbing, any trade, we have scholarships that apply to those. Culinary students, you know, students that might be interested in a counseling career. We offer those as well. And we certainly have education and service and leadership scholarships that we offer, as well as I mentioned a little earlier, some in photography, volleyball, as well as swimming. So those are available for our students. We also have some specific to like special education. So for those young people that might be considering a career in that field, we definitely offer scholarships for that as well. And then we have some scholarships that are school specific, Ken. And so, you know, what I always encourage parents and students that reach out to the office here to do is to check with their school to see if they have any school specific scholarships. A couple we have are Manchester High School. There's several scholarships for students there, as well as James River, Cosby, Midlothian, Elsie Bird. So, you know, definitely opportunities out there for our children.
There it is. And a new scholarship, and you know, that has come up, and I think there's a new scholarship, the Mr. Holland Scholarship, right?
It is brand new, yes, the James M. Holland Dale District Scholarship.
So and that's awesome. He's a great individual who's been an advocate for Chesterfield County for many years, that passed away due to health complications this past year, and he has always, you know, been just a pillar of education in those spaces. But you know, that's another scholarship that will be available, that students can apply for as well. So I'm good to see that that's when someone had spoken and spoke about that, and I was like, you know, I'm glad his legacy would be able to be remembered in that space. So, but yeah, all those scholarships, and it's great. You know, those are things that we're looking at, you know, when really you think about the, you know, specific needs. You know, we think about a lot of times athletics, and just like you spoke on, I was an athlete. I was fortunate to have a sports scholarship, but there are many students who go to school and they continue a sports career, but it's not scholarships. And so there are spaces out there and people that, such as these volleyball and swimming, that people who know the struggles of academic and the cost of it, that they look in to help, you know, other individuals that want to continue in that space. So you'll see the information once these open. It'll be on the different websites. I'll send a reminder out once they open as well for you all to take a look at all those parts. If your child fits one of these descriptions, they should apply. And like I said, I'll send out the information once it's available, and once we're able to those are released. All right, armed forces. The thing is that I'll always I look at those, that space where in some aspects, when I look in my past career and in the different times when I finished, I honestly wish that, and because I would have looked, if I'd have known to take a look at the armed forces and those spaces, that would have allowed me to be in that space, because it's something. When you think about teamwork, you think about someone who is an athlete in high school and their career stops in high school. It's an easy space for a former athlete to jump in, but it's many other people who are not, as we've seen some of our friends and family who's been in a space to really jump in that space. For some students, military isn't the last resort as well. It's a strategic choice. I've seen scholarships, kids who get scholarships coming right out of high school where, you see it's $100,000 scholarship. So those are things that, that a lot of times some parents don't know. As Staff Sergeant Christie, she's going to talk about these pieces and parts. And Staff Sergeant, can you explain how the National Guard differs from active duty?
Absolutely. First off, I just want to thank everybody for letting me be here. Y'all can call me Chris if it's a little easier. I know Staff Sergeant Hubbard's a mouthful. So before I go into how we're different, I want to jump in a little bit how we're the same, because we do have a lot of similarities, even though we're a little bit better. I might be biased, but so when it comes to National Guard versus active duty, we get the same boot camp, we get the same hands-on training, we get the same job training. Here's where it gets different, though. With active duty, whenever you join, you go to boot camp, you go to AIT, you then go where the needs of the Army are. So you don't really have a lot of say-so on where you're going to live for the next 3 to 5 years or more, depending on what your contract looks like. However, with the National Guard, you're going to go to boot camp, you're going to go to AIT, you're going to graduate, you're going to come back home. At this point, a lot of the students know what colleges they want to go to or have even already been accepted by the colleges. This is where we play our part. So with us being the National Guard, we are a part-time service with full-time benefits such as educational, health benefits, life insurance, the whole shindig. A lot of things that these students don't think about right now because they're 17, 18 years old. They're going to be young forever. With the National Guard, once you've completed your initial training and your boot camp and your job-specific training that you do, because they pick all of that. They pick their job, they pick their unit where they're going to be in the state of Virginia. That's where they drill 1 week in a month and 2 weeks in the summer. Now, sometimes there are additional activations when there's natural disasters, stuff like that, but their training for the National Guard will be in the state of Virginia. If it is outside of the state, the unit will take care of the travel. They do not pay out of pocket to go to training in another state if it happens. We serve a dual mission. We are both state and federal, whereas active duty is strictly federal. They are usually stationed at military bases throughout the country, sometimes out of the country. You hear about Korea, Okinawa, stuff like that. Again, National Guard stays in the home state. With us serving a dual mission, when it comes to the state missions, if there's natural disasters, such as this recent snowstorm that we had, where they declared a national emergency, we had our guardsmen coming out, making sure families had access to food, water, if they were blocked in and needed to have emergency access, things of that nature. We did the DC mission during COVID, the inauguration, fun stuff like that. And while they're activated during these times, they're getting active duty pay. One of the biggest things I will say is train here, live here. Oh yeah, there we go. So one of the biggest difference we have when it comes to education, though, is active duty. They have access to federal. That's every branch of the military, Navy, Marines, active Army, Air Force. they all have access to federal tuition assistance. Here's where the National Guard shines, because on top of that $4,500 that we're going to offer you for federal tuition assistance, we offer up to an additional $20,000 per year for as long as they're a service member. So if they want to go to school for 4 years, 8 years, as long as they are wearing a uniform and showing up to drill 1 week in a month and 2 weeks in the summer, their tuition is covered by the National Guard. And it's not limited at just an associate's, just a bachelor's. We have medical programs and such that can take you into your doctorate should you go that path. You get, in the National Guard, you get paid for drills, activations, and annual training. That's a little bit of the difference between us and active duty. Active duty, they get paid on the 1st and the 15th, but they're doing the same job all day, every day, 24/7. Whereas with the National Guard, you're having access to the drill 1 week in a month and 2 weeks in the summer. The rest of the time, you're going to school full time, setting yourself up in the civilian world and a career. You get in the best of both worlds while we help you by being that foundation to build your success. That's how we're different.
Thank you. Appreciate that one. And just let me know when, if you want me to go to another.
I'm ready.
Okay.
I tried to help you out a little bit by putting the question in the slide.
I appreciate it. All right, there it is. Oh, hey, now, how does education funding work while the student's in the Guard?
Well, I'm glad you asked. So upon completion of basic training, the state tuition assistance is accessible. So one of the things we see a lot that a lot of people don't know is if you have a student who is 17, a junior, and has parental consent to enlist, and they enlist, that summer between their junior and senior year, they will go to boot camp because we do not interfere with school. Our goal is for the students to be successful. That means not interfering with their education. So once they complete boot camp and they come back their senior year, they have access to that state tuition assistance, which means they can start doing that dual enrollment, and it's paid for. That which is going to set them for success in the long run, because that's going to get them some credits in advance. That way, that year after they graduate their senior year and they go to AIT, they're not really missing out on any education because during their senior year, they were able to use that state tuition assistance for the dual enrollment, should they choose to. They don't have to, but it's there if they want to. But once they complete their senior year, graduate, then they'll go to AIT, which is their job-specific training. Upon graduation from that, and they come back home, they get accepted, or if they haven't already been accepted into the college of their choice in state. It can be out of state as long as they have a brick and mortar in this state. I know some people get a little confused about it. But they get in touch with the veteran liaison, let them know like, hey, I'm going to boot camp or AIT, whatever path they're on at that point, and give them a copy of their orders. How long is AIT? It's based upon the job. So things like infantry, those are going to be a little shorter because it's just more combat arms, whereas medical could be up to a year, if not longer. And while you're at those trainings, it's active duty pay. And most of these certifications carry over. So let's say you want to be, I'll say a medic or a nurse, because a lot of people are going to the medical field. Upon completion of AIT for 68 Whiskey, which is our medic, they're EMT certified. So they're already having credits that they get to bring back while they're going towards medical school. But yeah, once they complete their AIT and they are MOS qualified and they have completed all of their initial training, they come back here where they will drill 1 week in a month and 2 weeks in the summer. Outside of that is their time to go to school, get a job, prepare themselves for life however they see fit or however the parents see fit to help. Once they've come back and they've graduated, they now have access to both federal and state tuition assistance. And our tuition assistance covers up to 100% of your education. I say up to 100% because if you come in and you're wanting to go to a $200,000 school, we're going to cover up to $25,000 a year.
Awesome.
And then we can go to, that was a good question about AIT though. Good question.
All right. Can students combine military benefits with FAFSA scholarships and grant support?
Absolutely. I recommend it. Get all that money that you can get your hands on for education. Use the scholarships and the other accesses that you have for money first, and then let the National Guard pay the rest. Like that one's, I love that question. Absolutely. Get all the scholarships you can.
Now, what about commitment? Is it, and you spoke on this already, is it actual being asked about time, training, and what's the expectation?
Absolutely. So don't let any recruiter or career counselor tell you, oh, you only need to do 2 years of the military when you sign. No, every initial contract is going to be 8 years. However, you don't have to do it in full 8 years at one time. The most common subcontract, if you will, is the 6x2, because you need at least 5 years to have access to like VA home loans and such like that. That's the most beneficial term contract to get the most out of the education benefits. It also sets you up for success, because if you do a 6x2, by the time you get to year 5 and you've got 1 year left before you hit the ETS, or time for you to get out, you're going to have somebody come to you and be like, hey, you're now eligible for an extension bonus or a re-enlistment bonus. I'm all about money. I love money. So if I can set people up for success to have access to more money, not just now, but later as well, that's what I tend to do. But these are the different terms of the 8 years. So 8x0 means you just 8 years doing 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer. The 6x2, as I mentioned, that means for 6 years, you're going to drill 1 week in a month and 2 weeks in the summer. Those last 2 years are called IRR, or inactive ready reserves. You're still a member of this armed forces. You're just not going to drill and you're not getting paid. You're essentially put in a book on a shelf. And if World War III pops out or something and they're pulling people in, then you could potentially be one of the ones recalled. Now, once you do the 6 years and you've completed the 2 years, your 8-year contract is now complete. You no longer owe Uncle Sam anything. And then 5x3, 4x4, and 3x5. It's the same concept. The first part of those buys is the term that you'll wear the uniform 1 week in a month and 2 weeks in the summer. And the second half is your inactive ready reserves. For boot camp, across the board for us, active duty, it's 10 weeks. I'm not going to know where they're going to go until they sit down with a guidance counselor and they're like, all right, you're going here and here's your ship date. But they do take into consideration like juniors, seniors, those that are already in college, what that might look like. Because again, we want them to be successful. We want them to go to college and get the most out of college. So we tend to try and look and see if we can ship them when it's best for them. Now, it's not always a guaranteed. Sometimes we get lucky and they're like, all right, you've got 4 different ship dates that you can pick from. And sometimes they get one. But that's in a different system. I don't have access to that. They know when they're at MEPS what their ship date would be. Annual training, 2 weeks in the year, usually in the summer. I say usually because I came from a medical company before I came into recruiting and retention. And I ended up doing an annual training in January in -10-degree weather in Iowa. So it varies, but you will always know in advance when your drilling is going to be. Whenever they get to their unit, their readiness NCO or non-commissioned officer will print them out a schedule for the entire year that lets them know when their drill date will be, where the drill date's going to be, and if there's anything specific that they need to know about.
Awesome.
And I will say the expectations, like, we're pretty chill. Like, as long as you do what you're supposed to do, be where you're supposed to be, wear the right uniform, and do what you're supposed to do, you won't have any issues.
Awesome. There it is. Is there an option for students who want to trade or a certification instead of jobs?
Absolutely. So our tuition assistance with the Guard covers up to 100% traditional 2-year, 4-year, undergrad, community college, trade schools, vocation schools, apprenticeships, anything that is bettering you in your field of education, the National Guard will take care of.
All right. Awesome. And then what about money? What is it? How does it look?
We like money. All right. So this is a baseline. I could sit here and talk about the National Guard benefits all day. So I did this so that I wouldn't sit here and dump truck all this information on you all. So the Montgomery GI Bill is money. It's extra money. You get $493 per month for 36 months. It's tax-free, and it doesn't have to be consecutive. So let's say you go to school for your associates. You're not going to use up 36 months. So once you've gotten your associates, if you want to take a break, it pauses. And then once you continue, it picks back up. Again, state tuition assistance up to $20,000 a year. All National Guard members qualify for this. There's no bottom line. Like, every member of the National Guard has access to that up to $20,000 a year. Federal tuition, same thing. Everybody has access to it. That's $4,500. And then drill pay, I started at the bottom just because that's where a lot of people start out when they enlist. And you're making roughly $300 to show up for 2 days to exist, especially for those if they're in between, if they haven't completed their training yet, which is kind of what this is catered to. Like juniors, for example, like I mentioned, if they are 17, a junior, have parental consent, and they meet all the qualifications to enlist, and they do enlist, well, with the National Guard, the day you contract is that's the day your contract begins. And we're not just going to have you sitting in a unit not getting paid. So you would go to what's called the RSP, Recruit Sustainment Program. So let's say somebody enlists in February. Well, they're not going to ship off to boot camp until at least June. So between February and June, they're going to show up to a drill weekend, 1 weekend a month, and collect a paycheck to exist. Because we can't really do anything with them because they're not job trained. So during that time, we're going to teach them the basic fundamentals, rank structure, drill and ceremony. We're going to train them how to be a soldier before we send them to boot camp and AIT on how to be a soldier. But yeah, if McDonald's called me and was like, hey, I'll give you $300 if you show up for 2 days to put salt on fries, and we'll teach you how to put salt on fries, I would absolutely do it. Some additional opportunities if qualified. I say if qualified just because every person's situation is different. No two contracts are exactly the same. I actually have worked twins, and even their contracts were not the same. The GI Bill kicker, if you score over a 50 on the ASVAB, your students should know what the ASVAB is. If their school has not supplied it, I can give an ASVAB. It's just not going to be at the school. But if they score higher than a 50 on that qualifies them for the GI Bill kicker, which is an additional $350 a month tax-free. Now, here's the cool thing, that $493 that I mentioned with the GI Bill and the $350 a month for the GI Bill kicker, that's cash in their pocket. That does not go towards school. So this is in addition to the $24,500 a year that they could potentially have access to for education. Student loan repayment, I'm not going to harp on that one too much. I'm not a huge fan of the student loan repayment just because it can be a hassle, but we do offer up to $50,000 for student loan repayment. And then here's that split train option that I was talking about. Juniors that are 17 and have parental consent can enlist into the Guard. My rule, and I don't know if every recruiter or career counselor does this, but my rule is if I'm working a student who is excited and wants to join the National Guard, if they are not in good standing with their school, like grade wise, I will make them get on track before I will move forward. Because at the end of the day, my goal is for the students to be successful. And if they're not academically ready to move forward, then all I'm going to be is a distraction.
Awesome. Any additional options available through the Virginia Army National Guard?
Yes. So as you can see here, the Simultaneous Membership Program, or SMP for short, for college ROTC, if you have students who are going to like VCU, VTech, a lot of these colleges that have ROTC, they can apply for the SMP program their sophomore year. And all that is essentially is they buy out our contract and they pay them more. And upon completion of their schooling, they will graduate as a second lieutenant with the opportunity to either stay National Guard, stay in their home state, or go active duty, and they get to do it debt-free. And
Awesome.
then if you'll pull up that other one that I emailed you, that explains a little bit more about the SMP and things that fall under the SMP.
Yeah, that's it.
I try to push the SMP because a lot of people just don't know about it. And if you're going to a school with an ROTC, any of them can go for it.
And what out, because I'm trying to figure out how to. I see. Well, see, I don't know. Where is it? Nope, that's not it.
Or if you want to just email it out to them, that's perfect.
Yeah, I'll email it out. And what this is, everything that she spoke on right there, you guys, she also sent in a PDF as well. So in a different space. So I'll send that out to you as well. So you can, so you'll understand, and so you'll see those parts and pieces in a different look. But here's our information. I'll end up sending out all that information out for her as well. So if you want to further that conversation you can with her as well. And everyone on here, I sent out their contact information. If you have any questions in that space, please don't hesitate to to ask anybody in regards to that, because this is your students next 2 to 10 years, really, when you think about it. Either they're going 2-year college or they're looking to get a doctorate. So the thing is that how do you put a price on that realistically if you don't have the information? So we want to make sure you have all information. Let's go as much information as we get. If we can't find the information, if we don't have the information, we'll try to find it for you. And now, are there any questions by anyone, by any of the parents today? Raise your hand, or you can put in the chat.
Oh, if I may also, because sometimes I get these questions, I didn't even think about this. If your student joins the National Guard to have education, what they join in the National Guard as, like, they can join as a cook and still go to school to be a doctor. They do not have to correlate. Now, some people do pick a job if they qualify for it that caters to what they're going to school for because they want some of those certifications to carry over. But it is not it is not mandated. I know people who are 11 Bravo, they go and shoot stuff for 1 week in a month and 2 weeks in the summer. The rest of the time, they're physician's assistants.
There it is. There it is. And also remember, in all of this, you guys, remember, each school also has a school counselor. Reach out to your school counselor and talk to them. Let them understand and know what you want to do, some of your goals and stuff. But then also don't forget to, each school has a grass representative as well. And if I'm correct, Christy, there's a recruiter that comes in at least 3 or 4 times a year. So go up to tell your student if they are interested in that space to go and talk to that person. Again, apply the CEF. I'll send all that information out, and all those parts and pieces. That's gonna help you in that area. And here are the grants representatives. Again, I'll send that out to everybody as well, so where to find that information is, where that is, and who that is, and then on the website. And then also. Assuming only seniors can apply for scholarships, is there anything that they can get a head start on before that? Anyone? I guess that would be a Lauren question, possibly. Anyone that can answer that question.
Yeah, I would say there are junior scholarships. I would say potentially at this point in the year there might not be as many available. But you can go to grassporva.org/scholarships, and you can go to our More Scholarship Opportunity page, and it's got a bunch of different resources that you can look at to see if there are junior scholarships that are still available that you qualify for. But I would say one thing that you can do right now is look at the scholarships that are open right now this year, and typically the criteria for that scholarship is not going to change drastically between one year and the next. So finding scholarships that you or your student might want to look at, come fall, and just write them down somewhere so that you know to start looking for when the new scholarship opens up in the next academic year, so you don't miss out on it.
Awesome. And again, these are some of the things that we've had over the course of this year. I'll send these out. A lot of these are coming to fruition. Scholarships.com is another space where you can find, some scholarships as well. A lot of times they start at the beginning of the year and they run through, I think, in the beginning or end of April, if not in the summer. So there are always different scholarships out there. Again, you never know where they exist. If you go into your any of your these off stores, brands, and say, do y'all do scholarships? Just ask the question. So those are the things that sometimes that you just find out, just like I found out today that the one nonprofit has one. Again, the NFL, they have a scholarship. I'll send out that information as well. I've been sending out throughout the year. Again, these are some of the different areas that we've been using all throughout the year. But again, thank you again for all you guys. Thank you to our cast of experts, Gina, Lauren, and Chris. Thank you all for your information. Our next conversation will be on February 25th. Is HBCU for you? And then again, thank you. If you have any news media outlets are here, some that didn't let you guys know, make sure you reach out to Amy Bartolotti. She's my coordinator, and she can answer any questions in that sense. But otherwise, we appreciate you all for everything that you're doing, and thank you for joining us today.